Hi, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. And today we will be discussing something that doesn't really, relate to something in relation to how living income will operate and so forth. But it's more of a topic that is on the news everywhere. And so we've decided that it was about time to give some perspectives here. So we have two of our guests from the US. Precisely, we picked them because we know that the NSA is entirely like the biggest example at the moment in terms of surveillance. And so we have Darryl Thomas from Texas. Hi, Darryl.
Hello. It was nice to see you again.
Equally so. And Jeanne, once again from New York. Hi, Jeanne.
Hi.
So let's begin with this guy. We picked a topic and maybe people are pondering, hey, maybe that's me. I fear the NSA. So let's just begin with the whole thing of, why would we get to this point and how did we get to this point? Darryl, what would you say about this?
All right. Well, look, I'm going to throw a couple numbers at you. 9/11. So in the wake of 9/11, I don't know how old you were, Marlen, when that happened, but I remember it, and I remember it was from that time to this moment in time, it was a completely different world in a lot of different ways. But back then, we decided as a nation to trade in. I'm sort of oversimplifying it, but we decided to trade in our liberty and our freedom, quote unquote, for security in the aftermath. And that came in the form of the Patriot Act. And that really opened up the Pandora's box of surveillance as we know it, and nothing is ever going to remain the same, after that. So, when the Patriot Act was discussed and put into law, I remember yelling at my radio because I was going, no, we're giving up, we're giving in. They're going to take all these rights and they're going to dismantle everything piece by piece till there's nothing left but a police state. And pretty much that's what happened. And even though a few of us saw this coming, back in 2001, when the Patriot Act was installed, a lot of people we need this because terrorists are going to kill us and blow up our buildings. We need to be protected from them. Go ahead and do what you can do. But nobody really thought it would reach to levels that it's reached now. Because number one, the internet was still kind of new, kind of uncharted territory. We didn't know its capabilities. And but in the very least, people thought most of their constitutional protections would remain in place. So I told you that story to tell you this one. It goes back further, that 9/11. In the late 1800s in Europe, or in England, I should say, there was a liberal social theorist named Jeremy Bentham who was considered the father of utilitarianism. And that's a doctrine that says that all actions should be directed towards achieving the greatest happiness for the greatest amount of people in a society. All right, that's oversimplification, but that's what it was. Obviously, it's a flawed system because it doesn't take into consideration what's best for everyone. But this is something else that Bentham was interested in. He was obsessed with prisons. He was obsessed with creating the perfect prison to house inmates so they could be controlled. He came up with a prison that he called the Panopticon. Now, the Panopticon is Latin for, or you can imagine, the all-seeing eye, right? Like the Eye of Sauron, basically. It's a circular prison. In the center of this big tower where you can have a guard see all the prison cells. They're arranged in this circle. And it was constructed in a way that even though the prison guard can see all the prisoners and what they're doing, the prisoners themselves couldn't see the tower. So they couldn't tell if they were being watched or not. So they had to act as if they were, because they had no idea if they were being watched or not. So the theory of Bentham was that the prisoners would self-regulate their behavior. And the goal was, and this is to quote Bentham in his own words, to obtain power of the mind over the mind. So in this case, surveillance is used as mind control, thought control over with a small elite or a minority controlling huge majority of the population. So surveillance, number one, is the issue of control. Cyberspace, as we know, is a dimension of our collective unconsciousness, and to gain power over that would be a huge benefit for the elites and the political servants that do their bidding. They understand there's no metaphysical consequences for their actions, so they are pretty much answerable to no one. Our political process has been made pretty much personal kingdoms for these guys who can stay in there for 20, 30, 40 years. They've rigged it so it's almost impossible to get them out. So they can do this without fear, or they can implement all these controls. And here's the thing. I don't really believe that the politicians in Washington know what the NSA is up to, because the NSA will lie to them. They have why would they tell the truth? They're not accountable to the Senate or to the House or to the President. They can just do whatever they want. So that's the big problem with surveillance and how it's embedded itself in the fabric of democracy, and why some people are afraid of it.
So let's talk about, in relation to this, Jeanne, if you want to talk about we got the governmental aspect that Darryl has just explained, but what about the corporate aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I just want to stress too is that we're talking about the NSA plus 16 other intelligence agencies with thousands and thousands and thousands of employees, all using our taxpayer money to investigate our citizens and sharing it internationally with other countries that are doing the same. And it's not limited to the United States, of course, it's an international agenda. And so, as Snowden said, if one country is not allowed to surveil their citizens, they just get another country to do it for them. And that's, it's so massive. That's what is so amazing about what we've learned in the last year, the extent of it. I don't think anyone had any idea of how massive this regime of surveillance was. In addition, well, the thing, as you said, the thing that should concern us is the merging of the corporate interests with state power and the gathering of information to control and use maybe even as punishment in terms of who gets to tell history, who gets to say what's true, who gets, so it's very complicated when it becomes, it's not an issue of government per se, it's a merging of corporate interests with government interests so that the line becomes blurred as to what exactly is being served through the collection of this intelligence. Is it for profit, or is it for state security, or is it a combination of both? And one thing that is amazing to me too is the lack of interest that most people have about this, the extent of the passivity in terms of investigating what exactly is going on with this information and who's using it.
So can you, any of you, expand on how does this directly affect democracy, or the current idea of democracy, because as we know it hasn't really existed, but how does this undermine also what Snowden was saying, privacy? How does it affect any person that may be watching this and not knowing really how that affects their own lives, or maybe even the way that they manage their lives.
Well, Snowden himself said the reason why he became a whistleblower was because the capacities of the NSA were, in his words, horrifying. And for someone to take it upon themselves to put their lives in jeopardy, to put their, basically to be subjected to torture for years and years and years before ever going to trial, like they did Chelsea Manning, tortured the hell out of that kid for leaking information. You have to wonder, like, what are they up to? And they're up to no good, and we really have to ask ourselves, would we have done the same thing if we were in the same position of Edward Snowden? Would we have been able to take that risk, looking self-honestly at ourselves, knowing the dangers, you know, likelihood you'd be killed, your family would be targeted, your friends would be targeted, harassed until whatever. Basically, what the NSA does is collect and store data. They can collect and store data forever. What they say they are doing, what they probably are doing, are probably, you know, two different things. We don't know what they're doing, and that's a problem. So the issue why it's of concern is because we, as in this casino capitalist economy, have a tendency of turning tools of oppression into forms of entertainment, which will sort of inure people into accepting the oppression and accept it, and further alienate themselves and disenfranchise themselves without them even realizing it.
But that didn't happen like already from the very beginning, because my perspective is actually that all of this information that is coming out should have been actually public from the very beginning, meaning in terms of how governments operate, or how they spy on each other, or the level and extent of control that they have over civilians. And all of this is happening from my perspective because we actually gave way to it, because we completely abdicated our responsibilities to anything that has to do with government, with how it functions, with how our data is stored. None of that was of our concern. We just kind of went for it as civilians, like, okay, daddy government is taking care of me. So what I see and how I could explain what we are witnessing now is nothing else but the absolute control and takeover just as individuals, because we never took that responsibility for ourselves, and how we have actually allowed these very few elite people on top to do whatever they want with all the power that they gained from the very beginning, from us accepting that irresponsibility.
Look what you have to do, though. You have to become an Edward Snowden or a Chelsea Manning and face all kinds of torment, and then have the whole world know about it. There's no place where you can hide. There's no place where you can go back to your former life. You have to give up everything. Remember, you have to be prepared to do that. And there's not that many people in the world who are prepared to do that. So I'm grateful for those people who take it upon themselves to blow the whistle, because it is now a criminal act to do so. It used to be we were going to safeguard these people because they are doing a public service and letting our government, or showing that our government's up to no good, or people, parts of the government's up to no good. But now it's been criminalized. I don't know if you understand how really like a blow that is to our process, but they can take you in front of a secret court that shouldn't be there. They can throw the Constitution out the window, and it's just your ass, because you have.
But
no
it's already been thrown out.
It wasn't always like that, though, Marlen. All I'm saying, it's a creeping authoritarianism that has been wedded together with absolute corporate control that made it possible. The military, entertainment, industrial complex now is the government. So you can say, like, well, we gave up our responsibility. Be aware that yes and no. Yes, we didn't do enough to stop it. And no, that was already moving towards this direction from from the beginning of this country's formation, unfortunately.
Exactly. I mean, I would just agree with that and say that the thing is, a lot of people didn't have the imagination to project what was going on after 2001 and what the NSA and these extrajudicial agencies were capable of doing. So that black sites where people were being taken out and off the streets and taken to places where they were being tortured was not something that the average American would even believe possible that was happening in a post-legal America, or that. So in a sense there was a lack of response because there was a lack of imagination that it was possible that all of our judicial constraints were gone.
What I can agree with
our protections had been nullified basically overnight, and it happened so fast that in that regard, what Darryl's saying is that we really weren't, as an American public, partly we've been brainwashed into thinking that we do have this democracy and that we could count on it, but we really weren't prepared to see everything thrown under the bus in 10 years, and so there's a certain lag now where people are it's a lot of people are running back to wanting to forget because it is so incredible what's happened. It's so painful.
It sounds like traumatic
post-traumatic disorder.
Yeah. So it's like a lot of people are in shock about it because now they're like waking up, and after the door is closed, the ship has sailed, but people are like, oh, whoa. And I think that's part of the freak outs that we're seeing. And I mean, I'm glad it's there because otherwise, if that wasn't there, we'd still be asleep and nobody would be up in arms, and they would be that much further ahead. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people still, like Jeanne said, exist in this idea in their minds that this is a democracy and the rule of law still prevails, and they're not even aware of what sociopaths are capable of doing or conceiving or imagining. I mean, geez, I can't think like a sociopath, but I better start learning how because they're the ones that are in control of the world, and if I'm not as ruthless or prepared to be as ruthless and brutal as they are, then they're just going to run over me without any fear of reprisal or consequence. And I guess we got to match that. I don't know what else to do. We can't be angels in a playpen of demons. That's not going to work.
And it does mask our this lack of imagination of being able to conceive of the ubiquity of this surveillance state. And our loss of free trial for trials and representation. I mean, we have secret courts now, and this is what Darryl was saying. It does match our ability in the past to have disregarded inequality, racism, poverty in our own country. I mean, all the disenfranchisement that we saw, and all the previous wars that the United States, for instance, among other countries, have engaged in. I mean, we do have a great ability to not see what's right in front of us, but in this case, we're talking about an elephant in a room that that was invisible until it became visible, and then it was freaking enormous.
How I see it is that, in a way we do benefit from, for example, getting to know the specifics of how war is being waged in ways that we thought were unimaginable. Maybe we had suspicions of it through certain sources, but certainly, for example, things like WikiLeaks or what Snowden revealed are able to inform the public about what's taking place. But from there, what they expected, these whistleblowers and hackers such as Assange, they were expecting that then justice would take place, that the world was going to immediately change, and nothing has happened. What do you guys say about that?
Well, that just goes to our point that we both made earlier. They thought that they were living in a world where there was a thing called justice that existed metaphysically on some level that would level the playing field. And there's no sense. This is a existential world existence. There's nothing out there overlooking us and making sure everything's going to be put in the right place. Because if there was, it would already be that way, and it's not. And the people who are running this stuff know this. They run the game. They know there's no guardian angel watching over them, making sure they do the right thing. So yes, they are able to, like say, criminalize dissent, destroy the educational system, mollify the population with gadgets and entertainment, and make a ton of money.
Win-win.
No matter, with no questions asked and no legal ramifications. They can actually lie, cheat, steal, kill without any thought or fear of punishment. So yes, Julian Assange was a chump because he really believed in his mind that what his mind was telling him was actually true. That, oh yeah, this justice is out there and the world will respond. And no.
Well, to everyone in such case, because even ourselves, getting this information, it's like, oh, maybe things will suddenly change for us, but nothing will change unless we actually get hands in the government, and that's precisely the whole point of this, that all of these revelations have just pointed out nothing is what you thought it was. So what now?
So you have to educate yourself and really be willing to take off your blinders, your conditioning. You have to really be prepared to drop what you thought was true. Because what you thought was true, 99% of it wasn't. I mean, you're really going to have to, number one, get to know who you are personally, deep down in self, stop lying to yourself, try to get real with yourself first, and then maybe you'll be able to get real with the world around you, or at least take it on, so you won't be surprised by other people's sense of evil and their programmed natures. Because basically when you get into relationships with people, you're just getting into a relationship with their programming first, right?
That's the whole point, and I would like to just interrupt here because you guys were mentioning these psychopaths and these people that are up there, but I see that if we were in such position, you get so involved and so possessed by that position of power that maybe we would have done the same thing. Who knows? And that's where I would like to point out that this is like the extrapolation of our human nature, which is doing that. And we are now victimizing ourselves to it. So what can we do, as Darryl was saying, is one point, I'd say, get to that self-integrity, get to know yourself, and most importantly, becoming accountable of everything that you do. Because if we're going to be surveilled for quite a while until we actually take control of that or become the managers of this surveillance system, we will continue to be maybe, in the States or in America as it's happening now, they might file you for some attempt of terrorism or something like that based on what you write on Facebook or the types of messages that you send to your friends, or who knows. So, Jeanne, what would you say about this?
I would agree with you that we do reflect, we each reflect each other, so that our own dark natures is reflected in our government and in we get the government we deserve, perhaps. But one point that I would make is that this culture of corporate state merging for profit depends upon a wider culture of political indifference. So it can't work unless people are passive. So the antidote to that is to become involved, start understanding history, start reading history. Don't necessarily believe what you read, obviously, and become more involved in creating the world that you would like for your children to inherit. It's our individual responsibility. Everybody has to step up and not wait for somebody else to do it.
Absolutely agree. Darryl, what would you say on this?
Well, it's a massive undertaking. We really do have to take our blinders off, I think, because we don't want to end up like Julian Assange, holed up in a building for the rest of his life, because they're not going to let him go.
But at the same time, this guy, I will actually say it here in the Hangout to watch the documentary We Steal Secrets, WikiLeaks documentary. And there you can kind of get also the other side of the Julian Assange story, wherein he's more likely using the money that he would get from people supporting WikiLeaks to just have a secure place and kind of become this political refugee, when in fact he could be just escaping from justice system for other reasons, and that are explained in that documentary.
Well,
that can be as well, and becoming a rock star in itself, just like
the
amount of money that Snowden, well, not Snowden, but Greenwald was getting just to publish all this information. So to me, that's also like part of the establishment. They become just part of the establishment, wherein every week you'll get some news stories, and what's next? We know that even our pooping patterns are being traced, maybe, and so that is, what else can be said? There's nothing
you have
new
to take the good with the bad. I mean, Greenwald's been writing about this issue since the mid-2000s, or maybe before. So they're going to somebody's going to make money off the Edward Snowden story. Somebody's going to make money off the Chelsea Manning story. Somebody's going to they already tried to make money off the WikiLeaks story. I mean, nobody really cared about it. But I mean, that's just what we do in this society. We take something, if it's a story, we're going to try to make money off of it. All right, so leave that aside for now. I mean, you have to. I'm not going to judge Greenwald, because he has put up some really good writings in the past. Before, this last little bit, I don't know enough about it. I have to research it.
That's the point. He actually signed a contract with Omidyar, which is a massive corporation, to actually be able to release these documents. And you were speaking about this integrity point and having, that courage to reveal these secrets and so forth. But if you've got your life secured for millions and millions of dollars, then it's like,
how else? Well, how do you know? Well, put yourself in his shoes. Maybe the deal was that good. Maybe it's his way of look, I got to get connected with somebody, part of the power structure that's going to get the story out, or whatever. We can't be afraid of connecting with people who sit in the seats of power, because we're going to have to deal with them sooner or later. So I wouldn't judge it out just like a black and white thing. Wait and see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. But, someday somebody may make a story about the, LIG or the History of Destiny and want to make a motion picture out of it. I mean, what are you going to do then? Oh, we can't because somebody, I don't know. That's too big to judge right now. You have to
and who would play you?
Who would play me? I would hopefully Will Smith would play me. So that would be,
there you go.
That would be perfect.
So in terms of, just to get also to a point of conclusion in this hangout, my idea, my proposal is that, if this system is already here, we can give it direction to maybe be of use to, for example, implementing, because this is a living income guaranteed hangout, and we've talked about how it would be cool to use the technology to ensure that no corruption takes place, kind of take it over ourselves, meaning we take control of how it operates, and extend it to the government as well, so that we are all aware that we do have to develop that integrity that Darryl was also mentioning, and become active participants, knowing of each other, but not for the sake of making money out of it, as Jeanne was also mentioning in terms of the corporate surveillance for the sake of profit. Because then we will also become part of this corporation. So there is a solution to this, and the whole point of this hangout is also to kind of be controversial on this topic, to give all the sides and all the perspectives, but to ultimately see that there is a way out, and that, you know, getting into this paranoia or going into fear will do nothing about it. So what do you guys say on this?
Well, the only question left is, how do we get from this point to the point B, where we can actually
it's absolutely creating new political forces, because you cannot join the Democrats or Republicans
well, the Republicans have a very interesting issue. They've got this drama with the Tea Party Republicans, who are more idealistic, and they want to be more like, but they've got to fight with the corporate Republicans. So you have that. That's an interesting civil war.
They're falling apart, essentially. They're having
they're splitting. Actually, well, what they did, they created there are people who actually believe in those Republican principles as they see it, and they're saying, no, we don't agree with this corporate thing, because they're taking over the government and they're making a mockery out of our beliefs. We sort of need that on the liberal side. There needs to be a party that, within the Democratic Party, that says, you know what, you guys are becoming too much like the Republican Party. We need to stand up for the people instead of the corporate interest, and maybe create something out of that. I'm not looking at the libertarians. They would be the worst people in the world to.
It's got to be something new, because bipartisanship is gone. I mean, it's outdated. No one really even wants to deal with, you know, the old elephants in the room, so to speak. So we have to come up with new parties, of course, new, I mean, from people collectively joining with this single idea that we can change things. So instead of protesting, you know, to only maybe shut down the NSA, which I agree, it's a whole lot of money that it takes to maintain it, but to go beyond that and not only fear your own data being massively stored and all that, but to actually become active participant of taking care of the system itself, regulating it, because it's been all of it mostly deregulated. So that would be another point that comes with political participation and real democracy, which hasn't yet existed, as we've been also discussing. Jeanne, what's your perspective?
I agree. I mean, I think through legislation is probably the only way we can ever, you know, change anything in a literal way, so that we stop the onslaught of privatization and reintroduce bills like the Glass-Steagall Act, which protect, you know, from Wall Street looting, and just one step at a time. But it requires people becoming involved. So hopefully. New parties will emerge, like the Living Income Guaranteed Party, or however we want to call it, but that are sensible and pragmatic, and that ask for accountability on every level.
Yes, exactly. From the individuals proposing the solutions, because that's also something that is mostly overlooked. I can, you know, shed all the information, but if I, you know, create money with that or use it for my own benefit, then it's obviously counterproductive. So we have to become beings of integrity, people that can actually understand that the government is a reflection of ourselves. So if we want accountability, integrity, and transparency, we have to actually begin with that ourselves individually. And so I absolutely agree, Jeanne, in terms of becoming the new political force that doesn't have to deal with this bipolar paradigm, as I call it. Darryl, any last words for this hangout?
I think we have to be prepared to deal with the unsavory aspects of the mission, as it were, and that means getting involved in processes and people and money that we may not like or have to deal with. But this is all about relationships. We have to make relationships. We have to forge these allies and groups, and we may not agree with every single point, but we got to find enough agreement to build a coalition that can begin to assert influence into a political system that we want to, ultimately want to represent ourselves through.
Yeah, exactly. And also in terms of, for example, providing a living income already gets people out of that survival mode that doesn't allow you to have sufficient time to, for example, educate yourself on these matters. We're mostly always running from 2 or 3 jobs to make a living. That doesn't give you any time, not even to properly educate your children, not properly educate yourself in terms of how the system operates. So by providing a living income, it's the very first step, the immediate step, to create these kind of changes, because as Jeanne said, we have to go bit by bit and point by point.
And that will be the biggest hurdle to cross, because they don't want that to happen. They want to keep you busy, tired, and entertained. So be prepared
and we
for
give in to that, so that's up to us.
Be prepared.
Also.
I'm just saying, put the big girl boots on, because we're gonna be fighting.
Well, in relation to that, just to finish the hangout, I would say that it is also part of what we invest our time in. How responsible do we really want to be? Do we really just want to slack off and just be taken off by the current? Or do we actually want to make a difference and invest our time in educating ourselves, joining with people, because this won't be solved by itself. That's a certainty. Oh. So thanks a lot, guys, for participating in this hangout. A controversial topic, but certainly we do have options. So if you have any comments, please place them in this video. And thank you, Jeanne. Thank you, Darryl.
Thank you. Okay.
Stay strong.
Thank you, guys. See you next week.